Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and to the first entry into my rewritten DCEU. It's going to be a long one, so make yourself comfortable, and let's get into it. So those of you who already watched the setup video to this series will already know that the first phase of my rewritten DCEU will consist of 8 projects, those being Gotham Central The Long Halloween, Batman Black Mask, The Flash Rogue, Wonder Woman Trial of the Gods, Batman Pain and Prejudice, Hawkman, Superman Man of Tomorrow, and Justice League Invasion, which means that the first project, the one that we're going to tackle in this video, is Gotham Central The Long Halloween, which will be a 9-episode television program that combines 2 of my favorite comic book series of all time, Gotham Central, which gives us a more intimate look at the lives of the officers of the G.C.P.D, people like James Gordon, Renee Montoya, Crispus Allen. Instead of focusing on the superheroes and the villains of Gotham, we get more of a street-level view of the city and a more intimate look at what that city is like. And we're going to take that and combine it with, inarguably, one of the most popular comic books of all time, The Long Halloween. Now, what are we going to do with this? We're going to show Gotham before Batman. So because this is the beginning of our shared universe, we're going to start even before Batman or any of the heroes or villains have debuted onto the stage so that we can see what this city was like before it became sort of a comic book world. We're going to tell the story of The Long Halloween from 3 major perspectives, those being Jim Gordon, Carmine Falcone, and Harvey Dent, meaning, again, no Batman, and we're also going to be removing most of the villains who appear throughout the run of that story. And the reason is because if we do that, we can sort of get 2 things. First of all, we can get a more intimate connection to the characters that we do use, the police officers, the reporters, the mafia bosses. We can get a more intimate connection with those characters so that we care about them, and we can also save a lot of those villains for more impactful and valuable debuts down the road, because The Long Halloween does throw like a dozen villains into it, and honestly the majority of them really only exist in that story as an excuse for why Batman hasn't solved the crime for as long as he has, because this is a story that takes place over the course of an entire year, and the majority of the villains who are in the story really are just there to act as an excuse for why Batman hasn't figured out who Holiday is yet. So if we don't have Batman, we don't also need that distraction. You feel me? So let's get right into just casting our leads, which, as I said, are James Gordon, Harvey Dent, and Carmine Falcone. So James Gordon is the captain of the G.C.P.D. He's not the commissioner yet. He's stoic but not without emotion, especially when it comes to his family. He's brave but not foolish. He's strategically minded, he has a strong moral compass, but he's able to see the gray, like, for example, later in this universe where he's going to allow a vigilante dressed as a bat to run around his city. He's willing to bend but never break the law. He cares about his family, his fellow officers, and his city, pretty much in that order. He's a former U.S. Marine, which means he's a capable combatant. And in terms of casting, he absolutely must be able to rock a mustache. Now, we've had a lot of previous versions of James Gordon, from Neil Hamilton from the '66 movie, who I would be willing to bet most people probably are not super familiar with, to Pat Hingle, who plays a very small role in the 4 movies that he's in. Really, all I remember him doing is cheering, "Go get him," when the Batwing flies over at one point. Gary Oldman, who is, I think, pretty much the gold standard for this role. Ben McKenzie from the Gotham show, who might be a good actor, but he sure didn't prove it in that TV show, that's for sure. J.K. Simmons, who I think would have been amazing for the role had we actually gotten any time to see him in it. And Jeffrey Wright, who is right up there for Gary Oldman for me. I think he absolutely kills it. Now, in my considerations for casting James Gordon, this is going to be a very important character, not just for this television show, but going forward as well. Jim Gordon is a mainstay in the city of Gotham and a very important figure. So I wanted to make sure to get it right. And so one of the first people that I thought of was, of course, Bryan Cranston. Now, he's a very popular fan cast for this role, and I think that he would do a phenomenal job at it. The only problem being that I think he's A, slightly too old for what I want to do with this character, and B, I don't know that he would be super willing to do it. He seems to have transitioned by and large to things like Broadway and sort of smaller, more indie things that he can feel more in control of, I think. So I'm not sure that he would be overly interested in the role. Although I do think he would do a good job in it. I also thought of Ian Glenn, who most people will probably know him from either Game of Thrones or Downton Abbey. I don't know why I couldn't think of the name Downton Abbey for a moment there. He, I think, more so than anybody else, really looks the part, and he is a phenomenal actor. The only thing holding me back from giving him this role is that I recently found out that he plays Batman on the Titans television show, and it feels like he really phones it in on that. He doesn't really even try to do an American accent. He doesn't seem like he's particularly invested in the role. He's just having a good time, which, I can't hold against him. He needs a paycheck as much as anybody else. But it does make me question how much he would be willing to take what would probably be viewed as a downgrade from Batman to Jim Gordon. I don't know that he would be particularly excited to make that move. And the third person I really heavily considered was Bob Odenkirk, who is also from Breaking Bad. You probably best know him as Saul Goodman from Better Call Saul. Also a phenomenal actor. I think that he would be really good at the role, but I don't know that he has the buying power that we're looking for. This is kicking off our shared universe, and he's going to be the main character of this show, and so we need a name that is very recognizable and will put butts in seats. We need somebody who will bring people to the show on their name alone, and unfortunately I don't think Bob Odenkirk is that guy. Which is a real shame, because I do think he would be a phenomenal James Gordon. That being said, I believe that the person that I found will be even better. That being Ewan McGregor. Now, this is maybe kind of a strange pick. I recognize that he's not a particularly common fan casting for this role. But I believe that he would do a phenomenal job in it for a number of reasons. Number one, I think that he's incredibly underrated. I think that people see him and they just see Obi-Wan, and they forget about a lot of his more sort of dramatic roles, things like Moulin Rouge or Trainspotting. He is an incredibly versatile actor, but I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves for those roles. Although we did see a more dramatic side from him in the more recent Kenobi show than we saw in the prequel films. So maybe people are starting to turn around on him on that front. But I think he's a phenomenal actor. He obviously looks the part, and most importantly, he would rock a mustache like no one's business. You know it, I know it. He would be a very handsome man with a mustache. And because he's such a recognizable face, he's going to bring people to the show, even if we tell them that there's not going to be Batman in it. So, Ewan McGregor is my James Gordon. So, let's get into Harvey Dent. Harvey Dent is Gotham's White Knight DA, because this is, of course, before he becomes Two-Face. The only DA brave or dumb enough to go after Falcone, or really organized crime in general. At this point in time, organized crime basically runs Gotham City, more so even than the mayor or the police force. So it's uncommon to find anyone who's willing to put their neck out and sort of go out against them, and Harvey Dent is one of the only people who will. He has a very strong sense of justice, but he's capable of great violence, as we will almost certainly see, especially later once he becomes a villain. He's lawful good, but will slide into chaos over time. He's unsympathetic to any criminal. He's living with an undiagnosed split personality that we will start to get into throughout the course of this show. He loves his wife Gilda more than anything in the world. And in terms of casting, we need somebody who is classically handsome, has a square jaw, preferably willing to have short hair and a clean shave, somebody who is extremely charismatic and a good speaker. Now, again, we've had a lot of previous versions of this character from Billy D. Williams, who probably a lot of people will forget played this role on account of he was really only Harvey Dent for about 5 seconds before being replaced by Tommy Lee Jones, who did the actual Two-Face part of the role in the same film series. And, you know, I think he was a lot of fun, but I don't know that he was necessarily the Two-Face I'm looking for. Aaron Eckhart, who is pretty much, again, the gold standard for this role. I think most people, when they think of a live-action Harvey Dent, it's almost certainly that one. Nicholas D'Agosto, who is from the Gotham show, although we never really got to see him really flex his muscles. I think he got written off pretty early, so he wasn't particularly good in the part of the show that he was in. So I don't know, maybe he would have gotten better, but we never got to see. And Misha Collins has actually just been cast as Harvey Dent in the upcoming and probably going to be awful Gotham Knights TV show. So we do have that to look forward to. In terms of my considerations for this role, I had a lot of thoughts. This was a very important role, so I, of course, took it very seriously. My first thought went to Sterling K. Brown, who is probably best known for his work on This Is Us, as well as a lot of other more dramatic roles like that. He is such a great actor. You know, he has an amazing range. He can go from extremely happy-go-lucky to crying in an instant. He's very, very good, and I'm confident I will find a different role for him in this DC universe, but I don't know that he's the best choice for this role, which is also what I could say for Joe Magliano, who, again, I love this actor. He maybe isn't given the credit for being a particularly amazing dramatic actor. I do think he has more chops than he does get credit for, but again, I don't know. I see him in another role in this universe without spoiling anything. And Sam Witwer. He's another person that I very heavily considered. He definitely has the look down, and he's a DC mainstay. He, whether I want him to or not, will almost certainly wind up in this DC universe at one point or another, because he just seems to sort of circle this universe more than anybody else. So he will end up in this universe at some point. I can pretty much guarantee it. But I believe that I've found the perfect man for this role, and he's a very common fan cast, probably the most popular fan cast, and it is, of course, Jon Hamm. Now, in my efforts to find somebody to play Harvey Dent, I basically immediately thought of Jon Hamm and then spent what felt like days trying to find somebody else who could live up to that level of just perfect casting, which is not me tooting my own horn. He's a very popular fan cast. A lot of people have come to the same conclusion. He's a very versatile actor. We've seen him sort of play both sides of the coin, so to speak, seeing him as sort of a more charismatic leader in things like Mad Men, as well as seeing him as more of a twisted villain that we see him in things like Baby Driver or other parts of Mad Men, if I'm being honest. Again, I don't know that he gets the recognition that he deserves. He's very popular in certain circles, but he's not exactly an A-lister. So I feel like this would be one of his bigger roles, and I think he would be very great growing into it. So, Jon Hamm is my Harvey Dent. Which brings us to our last lead, Carmine Falcone. Now, Carmine Falcone is the most powerful man in Gotham, being the leader of the Falcone crime family. He's a Golden Age crime boss. He is a family man with 2 sons and a daughter. He wants peace for Gotham, but believes his iron rule is the only way that that's going to happen. Basically, he wants the city to be, peaceful, but he believes that he's the only person who can sort of make that a reality. He dislikes violence, but he won't hesitate for a second to use it. He has a hold on the mayor's office, the G.C.P.D, most judges and DAs. He really does control the city. He knows the Gotham Underground like it's his home, because in a lot of ways it is. He operates primarily out of Uptown, specifically the Bowery. His primary rackets include guns, liquor, and protection. He refuses to sell sex or drugs, and is disgusted by those who do. In terms of casting, we're looking for an older gentleman, somebody who has immediate gravitas and charisma, and a person who you immediately respect upon seeing them. We've only had a couple of versions of Carmine Falcone in the past, being Tom Wilkinson, who was not a particularly large role in Batman Begins. He had one major scene where he's sort of talking smack to Bruce, and then I believe he just sort of gets fear toxined and then thrown into Arkham Asylum. So he's not a particularly large role, but I think he did a good job of it. He's just slightly more villainous than what I'm looking for my Falcone. John Doman from the Gotham TV show is, I think, unironically, probably one of the better parts of that show. I think he's phenomenal casting for the role. I honestly, for a while, did actually consider just allowing him to keep the role going into this show, but I believe I found somebody better. But he's absolutely stellar. I don't necessarily recommend watching the Gotham TV show because it's not very good, but he is phenomenal in it. So maybe just find a highlight reel of him. And then the last one is John Turturro from The Batman, who again did a phenomenal job. I think he plays a mob boss very well. He's just not necessarily what I'm looking for in terms of Falcone. He plays the villainous side, I think, a little more than what I'm looking for. I'm looking for sort of a crime lord with a heart of gold, and he's a lot more twisted than that in that movie without getting into spoilers. So for my considerations of this role, I, of course, when you're thinking of a crime boss, one of the first names that's going to go through your head is going to be Robert De Niro. I really considered him for this role probably longer than I should have. He, I'm sure, would kill it. We know that he plays crime bosses better than almost anybody else. But I just don't know that he would necessarily be willing to do it. He did play a small role in the Joker movie. And from what I understand, he seems to somewhat regret doing that. So I don't know that we would have a particularly easy time getting him back. So I had to rule him out. I do think he would do a good job, but he's also maybe slightly too big of a name, I think, for this show. I also looked at Charles Dance, who's a phenomenal actor, probably best known in this circle by his role in Game of Thrones. He's a man who you immediately respect. He has that gravitas. But again, I've never heard him do an American accent. I don't necessarily know that he could pull it off particularly. I think he would fill the role very, very well, but I think that I found somebody who would do it better. And then my last consideration was Ian McShane, who is probably by far the least recognizable of these three people. He's sort of a character actor. He plays roles in things like John Wick, that Hercules movie with The Rock. He was also in Game of Thrones, but only for like an episode. He's a really, really good actor, and I do think that I'll find a position for him in this universe. He's extremely versatile. There's 100 different roles I could put him in. I just don't think he's the right fit for this one. Because the person who I chose for this role is maybe a slightly questionable choice, but let me defend it. I've gone with Michael Keaton. Now, Michael Keaton might not be necessarily the first person that you think of when you think of like an Italian crime boss. Actually, I think Keaton is maybe Irish or Scottish, so he doesn't even really fall into the right demographic. But we've seen his ability to play an extremely sort of calm leader villain, right? We've seen it in, of course, Spider-Man Homecoming is probably where most people would know that side of his character from. When he played the Vulture, I think that was the first time that I saw that side of him, and I was blown away by it. I still think that Michael Keaton's Vulture is probably one of the best villains in the MCU, which, to be fair, the MCU isn't necessarily characterized by particularly great villains, but he is absolutely among the top 4 or 5. We also see a lot of range from him in his more recent work, things like The Founder. He's really, again, like Ewan McGregor and John Hamm, I think that he's an actor who doesn't get the level of respect that he deserves for his ability. And on a sort of meta note, I really like the idea that the person who runs the city before Batman shows up and sort of takes over the city in a way is a previous Batman. I think that that's sort of poetic. And it's definitely something that I believe fans would be happy to see. So Michael Keaton is my Carmine Falcone. And I think that these three actors are absolute powerhouses. And while they may not necessarily be A-listers, I think that also plays into our favor. One of the things that I'm really trying to keep a mind for is casting these characters realistically, right? I don't, I look at fan castings online, and frequently what I see is they'll be like all super big A-list actors, right? They'll go immediately for, the Tom Cruises and the Brad Pitts and all of these huge big name Oscar winning actors. And while that's certainly good, I'd love to see a lot of those people in that role. Realistically, in terms of funding a movie, that's just not going to happen. You're not going to grab Tom Cruise and say, be my Two-Face. You know what I mean? He would have to be a much more leading character in not just the show, but in the universe in general. And even then, he would be just so incredibly expensive. So I'm trying to keep sort of the realistic idea of funding this show in mind in casting. And I think that these three actors are big enough names to bring people to the show for sure, right? Michael Keaton, Ewan McGregor, these are names that people recognize from other nerd properties and would love to see. John Hamm is a fan favorite. So I know that they are big enough names to be a draw to the show, but they're still small enough that this could be seen as one of their like bigger roles. You know what I mean? And I think that that's something that I really like about these particular choices. The other sort of star of this show is Gotham City itself. Now, Gotham is an interesting city to look at in terms of its sort of comic book history. It's changed dramatically over years where, sometimes the islands are in a complete different formation or there's more islands. I saw one where Bloodhaven was just like a fourth island off to the side, which I really didn't like. So this is the version of Gotham City that I'm going for. And it is a city ruled by crime, right? Like I said, at the present moment, Carmine Falcone and the Falcone family pretty much run the city. But even after, Batman shows up and the villains start, taking over, it's going to be a city that is defined by its crime and crime lords. The G.C.P.D, of course, fight back, but they're unable to make a lot of headway either because of corruption or because of just the strength of the villains in this town. It's a cold, wet town, the kind that never feels like it really has a proper summer. Its architecture is primarily shocking Gothic, especially in the older areas. It consists of 3 main islands, which are creatively named Uptown, Midtown, and Downtown. I didn't name them, that's just what they're called. It has many narrow alleys and derelict buildings that provide ample real estate for underworld dealings. And a catacomb of sewers, subways, and maintenance tunnels underneath the city create an undercity network. I've really liked the idea in certain renditions of Gotham City, namely the Arkham series, that there are sections of the city that are just, they've sunken into the earth and have been built over the top of, things like that. It creates this sort of romantic fantasy of a dark and gloomy city, and I really like that. So that's something that we're trying to capture with this version of Gotham City. It's separated from the rest of the world by these 3 bridges, which in the history of Gotham and comic books have been named many different things. So I haven't named them. Maybe if they become relevant, I'll name them at that point, but I think we'll just leave them unnamed for now. And most importantly, it's not just a normal city. Now, one of the things that really separates the DC comic book universe from that of Marvel is that in Marvel, Spider-Man is from New York, and Doctor Strange is from New York, and the X-Men are from New York, and some of them are from LA, and some of them are from, but they're all real cities, which means you're limited to in a certain way in what you can do with that city, because at the end of the day, it still has to be New York. It's a real city. Whereas in DC, it's Gotham, it's Metropolis, it's Coast City, it's Star City. It's all of these fictional cities that can be whatever we want, which allows us to make them more fantastical settings that we can sort of make the comic bookiness of them feel more realistic just by having the setting itself already feel more comic booky. Now, I'm not probably going to take it to the extent of like a Tim Burton where there's these massive statues and all this craziness going on, but it is something that we want to keep in mind, is that we don't have to play by the rules of, it being a real, already existing established city. A good example of this is actually, again, the Arkham series of video games, which are some of my favorite video games. This is primarily a video game channel, so it shouldn't be surprising that I'm bringing video games into this conversation. But they do a really good job in that series of making it feel like a believable city, but still also having it have these more fantastical elements. It does have these larger towers, these strange combinations of architectures, these lights and overhead trains and all of this, things that you wouldn't necessarily see in a real city just because they don't really make a ton of plausible sense. But in a comic book world, they don't really have to. They play by a different rule set. And so the Arkham series, if you've ever experienced it, is a really good example of sort of what I'm looking for my version of Gotham. Although in those series, it is, again, a good example of Gotham changing a lot, because I think throughout the course of those games, the Gotham that we see changes dramatically and is pretty inconsistent in terms of landmass. So in some cases, it's a very good example, and in other cases, it's kind of confusing. So, but it's a fantastical city that you wouldn't necessarily see in the real world, but it's still believable. That's the grip that we want to get here. That's sort of the log line of what Gotham is. It's the kind of city that feels both very old, but has a lot of modern technology sort of retrofitted over the top, right? It's the kind of city that would host a World's Fair even in like 2022, right? Because we see this in certain movies of Batman. We see it in like Mask of the Phantasm, where Batman goes to what appears to be a World's Fair. I don't think they actually call it that, but that's where he like gets the idea for the Batmobile and all this sort of futuristic tech. And we see things like robots and stuff, automatons. So it is a sort of more fantastical city in this sort of retro-futuristic style way, not to the point of like something like a Fallout or even like a Westworld, but it is slightly skewed to that sci-fi level, if that makes sense. It has tons of lights, but it's still very dark. If anything, the lights only make the darks darker. It has these overhead trains and trams that sort of go throughout the whole city and give the fans a blimp. I'm not sure why exactly it is that we want a blimp over the top of Gotham City, but we do. We really do. I'm not sure where it comes from originally. I think maybe the animated series. But let me tell you, you don't need to make this blimp part of the story. You don't need to make it, a plot point or even acknowledge it. If you just stick a CG blimp in the background of one of the vista shots of the city, you will have at least a couple of fans being really excited about it. It's a very easy thing to do, so let's just go ahead and do it. And again, DC has its own cities, so let's play with that idea. Let's get right into the show now. Episode 1, Halloween. The show starts with the same quote that the comic book and the animated movie begins with: "I believe in Gotham City," except instead of being spoken by Bruce Wayne, it's being spoken by Carmine Falcone, who stands in an office watching the wedding of Johnny V.D. through the slats in a window. It's a beautiful outdoor wedding on one of the rare sunny days in Gotham, and decorated with paper lanterns and white roses. There's well over 100 people in attendance, many of whom we will come to know over the course of the show. Carmine turns to address the man he's speaking to, Salvatore Maroni. They are accompanied by only their bodyguards, Milos Grappa on the Falcone side, and Frankie Carbone on the Maroni side. Carmine goes on to talk about how there's been enough fighting between their families, how if they came together, they would have near complete control of Gotham, from sanitation from City Hall, because of course they run very different rackets. They should use this wedding between Carmine's nephew, Johnny V.D., and Falcone's daughter, Pia Maroni, to come to an agreement that benefits both families in sort of a Game of Thronesian way. Falcone offers to share his leverage over the G.C.P.D. as a sign of good faith, and Maroni agrees to the deal, promising to come to specific terms later, and they leave to enjoy the wedding. Carmine goes to speak to Carla V.D. to congratulate her on her son's wedding. In this scene, we just want to see Carmine being a family man. We want to see him interacting with, people like Carla and Johnny and even the people on the Maroni side of things, because spoilers, not spoilers, this is one of the last truly happy moments of this television show for the Falcone family. So we want to really establish the relationship that he has with these people in this scene. Meanwhile, in the parking garage, Harvey Dent copies down license plates, wanting to know who's in attendance, sort of to find out who is close enough and trusted enough by the Falcone and Maroney crime families that they would have been invited. He's caught by Maroney's right-hand man, Frankie Carbone, who starts putting the boots to Dent. Dent gets some hits in, but Frankie is a natural fighter and quickly gets the upper hand. While beating him, Carbone mocks Dent, saying that the families are coming together. He tells Dent to check his notes. The plates he's written down are those of judges, council members, even the mayor. The Falcones run this town. They're interrupted by the sharp interjection of Alfred Pennyworth, leaving the party early. Carbone gives Dent a last good kick and returns to the party. Alfred helps Dent to his feet, making sure he's okay. They exchange names and go their separate ways. It's very much a situation where I don't think in this scene Harvey Dent would recognize Alfred Pennyworth. While the Waynes are certainly celebrities, I don't know that their butler would be, and especially given the fact that the Waynes have been dead for a while, and Bruce has been absentee from Gotham for many years. I think especially given that setting, their butler wouldn't necessarily be somebody who you would recognize at a party. So, anyway, back at the G.C.P.D, Captain Gordon, because he's not commissioner yet, is having a conversation with Lieutenant Harvey Bullock about how Falcone is having difficulty laundering his money, and he tells Bullock to investigate it. Dent comes into the office somewhat beat up to explain what happened, making sure to say that Johnny Vitti was going to testify against Falcone, but now Falcone is paying for the wedding instead. This is something that comes from the comic books, where Johnny Vitti was originally going to be a star witness for a case that Harvey was building against the Falcone family, but Carmine got to him first and sort of turned him back onto his side and agreed to pay for his wedding and stuff like that. So that's where that comes from. When he mentions that he was saved by Alfred Pennyworth, Gordon, who was the responding officer in the Wayne murder, informs him that Alfred is the Wayne's butler, and they question why he would be at the party. Gordon tells Dent it was foolish to put himself in danger because there's no way to go after Falcone or Maroney, since the mayor, most judges, and half of the police force are controlled by the crime lords. Even if they could get evidence, no one would prosecute. Dent tells Gordon that Frankie Carbone said much the same thing, and tells Gordon about the families coming together. Gordon mentions that outside of the three men in this room, Gordon and the Harveys, no one is stupid enough to go after them. So Gordon, Dent, and Bullock make a pact to root out corruption in Gotham and take on the mob. After the scene at the G.C.P.D, we follow Gordon home to Tri-Corner, where he is greeted by his wife, Barbara Keene Gordon, and high school-aged daughter Barbara, and his baby, James Jr. The comic books have made the Gordon family especially convoluted to talk about because the parents, James Gordon and Barbara Keene Gordon, have named their children Barbara Gordon and James Gordon Jr. So you'll notice at some point in this presentation I give up writing Barbara Keene Gordon and James Jr. and just replace it with BK and JJ, so look forward to that in the future. Gordon leaves work at the door and is loving to his family. It doesn't matter necessarily what happens in this scene where he's with his family, just that we get the feeling that it's a happy family and that Halloween is soon. So it's the sort of situation where he comes home, he sort of leaves all of the stress and bloodshed and, all of the bad things that come with being a captain of the Gotham police force outside, and just comes in and we see, maybe the kids are trying on their Halloween costumes or there's just decorations up, things like that, so that we know Halloween is in the next day or two. And we get to see the relationship between him and his family. Dent, on the other hand, goes home to his wife, Gilda, who he finds smoking a cigarette on the back porch. He pours himself a drink and complains to Gilda about his day and the corruption in the city, specifically mentioning the Falcone and Maroney's coming together, and that he feels powerless to stop them. We really want to show the difference between these two homes. The Gordon household is warm, inviting, a bit messy, probably because they have kids. But the Dent home is cold, industrial, and clean. We really want to show the differences between these two families. It's the sort of situation where Harvey comes home and he just unloads everything that's happened in his day directly onto the shoulders of Gilda, where they maybe sort of share the load, whereas Jim holds it in himself and he doesn't share it with his family, so they don't really understand the life that he is living outside of his home, whereas Gilda understands exactly, blow for blow, everything that's happening. And we get the sense that while the Dents are unquestionably in love, there's an unspoken tension under the surface, just a present discomfort on the side of Gilda that may almost read as fear or guilt. It's definitely not a situation where she's afraid of Harvey. It's not like a domestic abuse situation, but she's afraid sort of the city and what it's going to do to Harvey and to her family, less so than she's afraid of, a domestic abuse situation. I just want to make that clear. Harvey Dent is absolutely not a wife beater. The next day, we see Carmine talking to his son, Alberto, over a meal Carmine has prepared. They talk about the alliance between the Falcone, Moroni, and Vidi families, the Vidi, of course, being the Johnny Vidi just got married at that previous wedding. His mother is Carla Vidi, who is Carmine's sister. So it's a sort of side family that married into the Falcone family. In the comics, they run over the Chicago part of the Falcone crime family, but they also, I've never understood it because in the comic book, Carla also spends like an entire year in Gotham, and I don't know that necessarily makes sense if she's running a different crime family in a different city, so we're just going to not acknowledge that part, and she'll just be part of the Falcone family in Gotham. Carmine goes on about how he can finally give Alberto and his other children, Sophia and Mario, who will not appear in this, a stable life. They don't have to go into the family business of crime. Alberto says that he would rather take over Carmine's position. He's doing a Sudoku puzzle while he says this. It's sort of a tic that he has. While his meal gets cold, this irritates Carmine. He raises his voice at Alberto, telling him to put down the puzzle and eat. Then he goes on to explain how he gave his whole life to crime so that his family wouldn't have to, how he wants better for them. And he talks about how he sent him to Oxford so that he could have a higher education and make a better life for himself. He goes on to say that there's only a few more things that he needs to straighten out before they should be set for life. Gordon and Dent approach Wayne Manor, making small talk about how the place is empty with Bruce still out of town. And Dent says that rich boy ain't coming back, sort of to get across the idea that he believes that because Bruce has the money to leave the city and not have to deal with the problems that it has, that he wouldn't come back and try and fix it because he sees him as sort of a vapid rich boy, whereas he sees himself as a white knight who's trying to clean up the city. They're greeted at the door by Alfred, who shows them in and offers them a drink because he's a good butler. They question why Alfred was at the wedding, so Alfred explains that Carmine invited him because with Bruce out of town for an extended period, he left Alfred in control of his portion of Wayne Enterprises. It's a very common thing that happens in the comic books, even though it doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense, because why would a butler be put in charge of a multi-million-dollar corporation, but whatever. And that Carmine wanted Alfred to help him launder his money through the company by setting up a long-term partnership. Alfred explains that he turned Carmine down, but that him doing so will only slow Carmine. If he can get leverage on enough of the board, they will be able to vote for the partnership with or without Bruce's shares. Gordon and Dent leave Wayne Manor on that sour note. Back at the G.C.P.D., Gordon starts a conversation with Bullock about the case, but is soon interrupted by the entrance of Renee Montoya, who tells them she might have what they're looking for, and gives them the address of a warehouse she found it at Bullock's request. We cut to Gordon, Bullock, and Dent at a warehouse full of money. Gordon talks about how it's a shame that if they call it in, all the money's just going to end up back in Falcone's hands before the weekend. Dent recommends burning the money. Bullock says it's a terrible idea that'll bring Falcone down on them, leaving the decision up to Gordon, who agrees it's the only way to get it out of the crime lord's hands. And so, Dent burns the mountain of cash and they walk away, knowing that they've started down a dangerous path. We see Gordon back at home. He has a brief conversation with his daughter Barbara about her college application. She wants to go into criminal justice, specifically forensics, to follow in her father's footsteps. But he encourages her to go into STEM because working with computers is much safer, and also because, if you know the comic books, at some point she's going to probably become Oracle and have to know how to hack into systems and stuff, so it's important to set that up early. He also recommends she leave Gotham. At this time, Barbara Keene, the wife, is out trick-or-treating with JJ, the baby. Gordon goes to do the dishes, and as he does, we start to have the scene intercut with someone preparing for a kill. So Gordon goes to clean a baby bottle, and then we see the killer put a baby bottle nipple over the barrel of a gun as a silencer. Johnny Vidi enters a dark house. We see him preparing for a bath, and as he does, we start to understand he isn't alone in the house. He settles into the bath, but his relaxation is cut short when a gloved hand holding a .22 slides in through a crack in the door. Johnny is startled as the door creaks, but all he gets out is a short shout before a round tears into him, killing him instantly. The killer places a lit jack-o'-lantern on the ground and the gun near the tub and exits as we hang on the crime scene. It's a very iconic shot from the comics and also from the movie, so we want to make sure to also have it be an iconic shot in this show as well. Harvey Dent parks his car in the driveway of his home as an electrical van pulls away. He smiles at some trick-or-treaters as he heads into his house. He closes the door behind him, and shortly after, the house explodes in a massive fireball as children run screaming. And so ends the first episode. Episode 2 is Thanksgiving. An armed man flees through a dark alley in Little Italy, pursued by Gordon, Montoya, and introducing Aaron Cash. He runs into a blind alley, swears at his mistake, and turns raising his gun in preparation to fight his hunters. But as he does, he spots a sewer entrance and slides into it. The chase continues into the sewer, where the man fires several shots back blindly. The man turns a corner out of sight, screams, fires a few more shots, then goes silent. The cops follow around the corner to find Mickey unconscious on the ground, with a fresh wound above his eye. Gordon and Montoya run up to check on him. After a few moments, Cash says, "Sir?" fear in his voice. The camera rises and turns with Gordon to see Cash pointing his pistol down a dark tunnel. Gordon follows Cash's gaze to see a massive hulking man, easily 10 foot tall, standing in the darkness, haunched to fit. Though we see little more than his silhouette and a more forward hand that's lit just enough to tell the skin is a mottled gray. Gordon calmly walks over to Cash, eyes never leaving the creature. Jim reaches out and gently lowers Cash's gun. After a beat, the creature turns back down the tunnel, and as it does, its eyes reflect the light like a cat. It lumbers away, and as it does, we faintly hear it grumble, "Born on a Monday." And we get the title card for Thanksgiving. So I wanted to introduce Solomon Grundy into this scene. I know that I said that I would be removing the vast majority of the villains from this story, but the largest reason why I want to do that is so I could introduce them in a more interesting way later. And for Solomon Grundy, I don't know that there's necessarily a more interesting way to introduce him. And I don't know that he necessarily needs like a backstory explanation, because he's just a zombie man who lives in the sewer. So I like having him as just being sort of like an urban legend, and so I thought it would be perfectly fine to keep him in this story. Harvey Dent is dead. Gordon says this while he's interrogating Mickey. The ringleader of the Dent bombing, saying that they know he built the bomb that destroyed the Dent residence. They trace the nails used as shrapnel to the store that they bought it in. This is something that Batman does in the comics, but there's 4 detectives on this case. Surely one of them could figure it out without a man dressed as a bat. Mickey admits to planting the bomb, but doesn't give up Falcone, the Roman. When asked why he did it, Mickey implies that it could have either been because he burned the money, or maybe it was revenge for the murder of Johnny V.D., suggesting that he thinks that Harvey Dent could potentially be the murderer. The other 4 members of the Irish also admit to their parts of the crime as well, but are released almost immediately because they work for Falcone, and Falcone pretty much runs the city. As the Irish leave consequence-free, Bullock asks Gordon if he thinks it's possible that Harvey killed V.D. Gordon says it's not impossible, but that he's been refusing to consider the possibility. We also learn that Dent is in fact alive, but has been in a coma since Halloween. Bullock mentions that if the bombing was revenge for burning the money, then he and Gordon are at risk as well. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Gilda sits at her husband's bedside, reading a book. She closes it, lightly brushes the hair off of his forehead, and exits the room to get a coffee. She has a brief, mundane conversation with a nurse, with whom she's on a first-name basis, implying that she's spent quite a lot of time here in the last month. Gilda re-enters the room to find Harvey sitting upright. Startled, she rushes back to the bedside and starts fussing over him. He tries to speak, but his voice is dry. She passes him a water. As they speak, he seems like he's not fully back. He asks if they've caught who did this. So I want this to sort of read as the first manifestation, by God, of the Two-Face persona. he's not going to be villainous in this moment, but when he's speaking with that dry, cracky voice, I want it to be what will become the Two-Face voice down the road. It's very much a completely separate persona, so almost a completely different person. And also in both the comic and the I guess not the comic, but in the animated movie based on The Long Halloween that came out a couple years back, they do a visual gag here where they only show the side of his face that will be unburned after he becomes Two-Face. So it sort of leaves the idea to the viewers whether or not he has already become Two-Face, like if the other side of his face is burnt off. And I think that's a visual gag that we're also going to use in this scene, because it's a good one. It's sort of cheesy, but it's a good one. Carmine is preparing Thanksgiving dinner, sharing a pleasant moment with his son, Alberto, when Carla busts in, possibly a bit drunk. She yells about how he hasn't killed the person who murdered her son, and yet he's enjoying the holiday as if nothing had happened, just being generally irate. After he lets her vent for a while, Carmine flashes her a look that lets her know she's gone too far, and she begrudgingly falls silent. Carmine calmly explains to her that he's done what was necessary in a way that both clearly admits to bombing the Dent residence and leaves the possibility that Carmine either orchestrated or doesn't care about the death of Johnny Vitti on the grounds that he was going to rat them all out. His only concern is to make it look like he's solved the problem so as to not further jeopardize the alliance with Maroni. Carla is silent but seems to begrudgingly understand Carmine's position, and she leaves embarrassed and no less angry. The Dent bombers sit around a table eating as Mickey joins them with a fresh bottle to celebrate a successful job. A cloaked figure enters the room and quickly dispatches the bombers. We cut to Gordon and the police investigating the scene. Bullock, Montoya, and Cash are all present. We want to see them just being a good cop unit in this scene. Cash investigates a plastic cornucopia placed in the middle of the table where the bodies are still seated. Bullock presents the gun with a baby bottle nipple on it to Gordon, and they come to the conclusion that this was the same killer as Johnny Vitti, and fear that he will strike again. Again, we want to make sure that we're seeing all four of our hero cops being an effective police force, right? We want to make sure that in this scene and in all future crime scenes that they're not like getting fingerprints all over murder weapons or walking all over evidence, things like that. We just want to get across the point that these are capable detectives who know what they're doing, and also that they function well as a team, because they're going to be, our go-to police officers in the force for the foreseeable future. Gordon gets home late to a dark house and finds his Thanksgiving dinner getting cold on the table. We get a beat of Gordon feeling guilty and sad before a light clicks on and his daughter Barbara enters the room and puts his plate in the microwave. They sit and talk while he eats. They talk about how Mom, Barbara Keene Gordon, and James Jr. were disappointed Gordon wasn't at dinner, but Barbara is able to raise his mood and even gets him to laugh. Gilda carries a plate of Thanksgiving dinner into Harvey's hospital room, but finds it empty. She runs to grab a nurse to ask a doctor if a doctor took him for a test or something. The nurse seems concerned and takes off to figure out what's going on. Gilda pulls out her phone, and back at the Gordon household, Jim is still enjoying a moment with his daughter when his phone rings. The conversation immediately dies. Barbara knows what this phone call means. He answers it, and before he's off the phone, Barbara is already cleaning up, knowing that he has to go. Gordon heads out to find his friend. Gordon searches around for a while before finding Dent standing outside in his hospital gown in front of a Falcone establishment. Gordon tries to talk to him, but Harvey isn't Harvey isn't responding. Gordon grabs him and Harvey almost hits him before catching himself. Harvey doesn't know how he got there, and he has no memory of anything since the explosion. Gordon and Dent share a shocked moment, and the episode ends. So we're 2 episodes in, which means it's time for a casting break. We've introduced a lot of characters, and I think it's time that we talk about who those characters are going to be played by. The first I want to talk about is Harvey Bullock. He's a great detective who's just been broken down by a long time working in such a corrupt city as Gotham. He's depressed, borderline alcoholic, he's just given up. He's a former hero cop with aims to clean up the city, but he knows the dark sides of Gotham better than most cops. He has a disheveled look and probably smells off. He uses an old revolver, and he wears a long coat and hat. He wants to be a good guy, but he can't. Basically, he's just what Jim Gordon would be with just 10 years of just constantly losing in Gotham. The person that I've chosen to play this role is Nick Offerman. Nick Offerman is, again, a very good actor. He's probably best known for more comedic work, being as how he's in Parks and Recreation, which is probably where the majority of people of him know him from. But he's also done some more dramatic roles. I think that probably people are starting to see that from him in The Last of Us show, which I haven't actually watched yet. But I know that he plays Bill in it, so I'm sure that he's definitely doing a more dramatic role there. But I think that also casting a slightly more comedic actor for this role will allow us to get a little bit of levity into this show. It's the situation where, we don't want it to be just 9 hours of constantly getting punched in the face, you know what I mean? So having somebody like Nick Offerman in there to, throw sort of a joke or just anything in there to undercut a little bit of tension every now and then, I think is very important. And so I think that he's extremely valuable casting to this show. The next person I want to talk about is Renee Montoya. She's strong-willed, headstrong, fiery, courageous to a fault, morally driven, follows orders unless she sees a better way. She's Hispanic, specifically Dominican in the comics. And she's a lesbian from a very religious family, which is a rubbing point with her relationships with them. The first person that came to mind for this role was Michelle Rodriguez. And I just could not, much like with John Hamm, I just could not find a better person to fit that role. For a while I considered, what's her name? Stephanie Beatriz from Encanto and from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But I don't know that she necessarily has the chops for it. I hate to be so harsh on her. I'm sure that, maybe I'm wrong, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that Michelle Rodriguez was the perfect person for this role. Even though she might be slightly more expensive than I would want to pay for somebody in this role, I just cannot think of a better person to fill it. So we had to go for her. And our last cop to cast is Aaron Cash. He's calm, collected, capable. He tempers the more impulsive qualities of Montoya. He's very strong, enough so to hold his own in most fights. He's African American and a cop, which is likely why he's so good at controlling himself, because, of course, that's an unfortunate reality of being a black man in America, is that basically at any provocation people will assume that you're getting violent or angry, and it's just a very rough situation. But he must be physically large and a gentle giant and have a good sense of humor, which is why I've gone for Chad L. Coleman. Chad Coleman is a very underrated actor. I think he's just phenomenal. I think probably his most known role would be as Tyrese in The Walking Dead, although he hasn't been in that role for quite some time, and the show has gone on for a long time, probably an inadvisably long time since getting rid of him. He's also in The Orville, although he plays an alien in that, so you may not have recognized him. And he was in The Wire a long time ago in a small role. He was also in It's Always Sunny, also in a very small role. But he's a very versatile actor. He can be funny. Every single interview I've seen of people describing who Chad Coleman is, they always say the same thing, which is that he is this huge man who's just very warm and soft and just like, a big teddy bear. And that is exactly the kind of person that I need to play Aaron Cash. I think this role was built for him. He's a little bit older than I would have liked, but he's still in the same age range as the rest of the members of our G.C.P.D. cast, so I think it's probably fine. Originally, I had wanted him to be sort of a new member of the force who could, be sort of an outsider, but I think this will work a lot better. Which makes this the cast of our G.C.P.D., and I think it's just a real knockout cast. I would absolutely kill to watch these four people interact in a television show, especially one that I was writing. So hit me up, James Gunn. I'm gunning for your job, James. Anyway, let's get back on track. Episode 3, Christmas. Title card, Christmas. We begin where the previous episode ended, in front of the building that Falcone lives in. Inside, Falcone is having a meeting with the heads of his family. They talk about business. They talk about their continued problems laundering money and how they're making progress towards getting Wayne Enterprises to agree to a partnership. The conversation turns to the killings, and one underboss claims he believes they're being played by Maroni and that they should break off the alliance. In the process, he makes the mistake of calling Falcone weak. Something to the effect of, Maroni keeps getting stronger and you keep getting weaker. The room goes silent, and Grappa, the bodyguard, drags the underboss from the room and throws him down a stairwell to his death. When he does, Milos sees a cloaked figure in the shadows, a few floors down, holding a .22 with a baby bottle nipple over the barrel. Grappa immediately recognizes this as the killer, gives chase, firing shots as he does, but never hitting his mark. The chase goes all the way down to the ground floor and out the side door into an alley. Grappa gives chase down the alley onto the street, but as he leaves the alley, the killer rises out of the shadows behind him and quickly takes him out, leaving the gun and a Christmas-themed snow globe. And our killer has struck again. The police investigate the Grappa crime scene and come to two major conclusions. It's now undeniable that this is a serial killer who strikes on holidays, and while the initial assumption was that Grappa was only killed because he caught the killer in the act, it turns out that Grappa was in fact the original target, as Cash notices that the figure in the snow globe is of Grappa. Gordon is pulled from the investigation by a reporter from the Gotham Gazette, Vicky Vale, who has a few questions. She asks about the killer. Why target Falcone's family? Is he a vigilante? Does the killer have any connection to the Calendar Man? Gordon answers the questions in the normal cop way of saying they have it under control, they're following the leads, not really giving up any information. Gordon and Vale have chemistry here. She says something to the effect of, I've heard that before, but for some reason from you, I almost believe it. Not in quite a flirtatious way, just in a warm, immediately friendly way. Carmine exits the building and sees Grappa's body being loaded into an ambulance. Gordon comes up with Bullock to begin questioning him about why somebody would be targeting his family and if he has any idea who could be doing this. Gordon and Carmine are not hostile to each other, although there is a clear tension. Carmine makes a comment that implies Gordon is one of the only cops that doesn't work for him. Gordon returns home and has a fight with his wife about missing yet another holiday. She understands that he needed to go, but is frustrated and unhappy. This is not the life she wanted for her or her kids. Harvey surprises Gilda with a new home for Christmas. They move in and she loves it. Gilda opens a box and starts unpacking, and we see that she has an Oxford sweatshirt inside it. We fast forward to New Year's Eve. Dent and Gordon are walking through Arkham Asylum with an orderly. Dent comments on how high-tech the facility is, and the orderly says that Dr. Strange, not the one that you know from Marvel, but Dr. Hugo Strange from DC, has been able to make many renovations with the help of the Wayne Foundation. They stop in front of a cell with a glass front wall, the other three walls as well as the floor completely covered with calendar pages. A bald man with snow-white skin lays on the bed, reading a newspaper, as the orderly knocks on the glass with a baton and says, "Julian, you've got visitors." The calendar man Julian Day walks over to the glass to begin his questioning, reciting his rhyme as he does. The rhyme is the 30 days hath September rhyme. It's a thing that Calendar Man frequently sort of has as his moniker. Anyway, while he's reciting it, he presses the newspaper to the glass, and we see the headline by Vicky Vale, "Will Holiday Strike Again?" She's coined a name for the holiday killer. He implies that he knows who the killer is, Calendar Man, but leaves it incredibly vague, even switching the killer's pronouns, he, she, they, as he speaks. He says Holiday is stealing his thunder and recommends they catch him before February, and starts listing the holidays that happen in February. Groundhog Day, Mardi Gras, Lincoln's birthday, Washington's birthday, President's Day, Valentine's Day. Gordon and Dent walk away shaken, but convinced Holiday is unrelated to Calendar Man. Back at the G.C.P.D, Gordon begins to make plans with his team on what to do tonight, when Holiday will most certainly strike. Commissioner Loeb takes control of the conversation and assigns Gordon and the good cops to Gotham Square to patrol and make sure that no one attacks the people gathered there to watch the ball drop. Gordon protests that Holiday's been targeting members of the Falcone family, and since none of them will be there, it's a waste of resources. But Loeb gives the order that those people will feel safer with a heavy police presence, which Gordon agrees with. Loeb goes on to explain that Falcone is gathering his family on a yacht for the holiday, and he'll be a mile out at sea come midnight, and that he himself, as well as a small team of cops, will be present at the party just in case. Gordon concedes to Loeb's plan and goes to Gotham Square. On Falcone's yacht, Carmine welcomes Loeb on board in such a way that it's clear he wants to know every single person on the ship, so he's like standing on the gangplank as people are coming up and greeting each person individually. Maroni walks up to speak to him, and they speak some false pleasantries that let us know that trust is rapidly deteriorating between them. When Maroni walks away, Falcone motions for some goons to keep an eye on him and his family. Alberto asks if it was a good idea to invite him. Carmine replies that it's best to keep enemies close where you can see them, and that if he tries anything, it'll be easy to dispose of the body out at sea. Carmine also tells Alberto that he is the only person on this ship that he trusts 100%. At Gotham Square, Gordon and Barbara Keene meet up with Harvey and Gilda Dent. Harvey pulls Gordon aside to tell him that his assistant found a connection between the Falcones and the Waynes, that apparently Thomas Wayne and Carmine Falcone were partners. As they separate from their wives, Barbara and Gilda also have a conversation. They talk about the Gordon kids, how Barbara's at a party and James Jr. is with a babysitter. The conversation turns darker when Barbara asks if Gilda and Harvey are planning to have kids of their own, to which Gilda explains that she can't have kids, but that Harvey keeps pushing the subject. Barbara reciprocates that she had to come here so that she could finally spend a holiday with Gordon, and they both express that they are dissatisfied with their marriages. And when the guys come back over, it turns into a fight, resulting in everyone leaving except Jim. Back on the yacht, Alberto Falcone exits the party onto a balcony where he is surprised by Vicky Vale, who starts a conversation with him, trying to get information out of him. She fake flirts with him, but he turns her down, saying that he was in love once before, and implies that his family did something unforgivable to her. But before he says too much, he's shot in the heart and then the head, causing him to fall overboard into the propeller, which tears him apart. Vicky's eyes shoot up to the cloaked killer, who pauses for a beat, places down the gun and a glass of champagne, then takes off running. Vicky gives chase, but Holiday escapes on a small speedboat. She watches as they get away. Episode 4. Valentine's Day. On a snowy morning, Carmine Falcone visits the grave of his son, Alberto Falcone. Leaving a white rose, he tearfully says, "Happy birthday, son." Dent and Gordon are at Wayne Manor, speaking again with Alfred about Thomas Wayne's relationship with Carmine Falcone. Alfred explains through flashback that once long ago, Carmine was shot and was brought to Wayne Manor to be treated, since going to a hospital wasn't safe at the time. We see a young Bruce in this flashback. It's the only time we'll see him in this show. Thomas saved Carmine's life, and Carmine felt he owed Thomas a debt, but Thomas never called the debt in before he was killed, nor does Alfred think that he ever would have. They weren't partners, not even especially good friends, just two men who respected each other despite leading dramatically different lives. Bullock meets with Loeb, who he tells that currently their top suspect in the Holiday case is Maroni. The conversation feels deeply uncomfortable, with Loeb acting as though if they don't find the killer, they will be killed. Dent returns home with flowers for Gilda. She's happy to see him, and they plan to spend the rest of the day together. Meanwhile, a group of Maroni henchmen sit in front of a car, or in a car in front of a Maroni restaurant, talking about what they'd rather be doing, when bullets tear through the windows, killing all 5 men, as well as 2 more standing in front of the building. The killer leaves the gun and a box of chocolates on the hood of the car. At the crime scene, the police discuss how much bolder of a kill this is for Holiday. It feels untargeted, more like a hit than an assassination. Vicky shows up and speaks with Gordon. He asks her, "Shouldn't you be spending Valentine's Day with your boyfriend?" To which she replies that she's too busy to date, so she'll just have to settle for Gordon today. Vicky and Gordon grab a coffee and talk. It's become clear to us that this isn't the first time they've done this. As they talk about her experience on New Year's, the conversation mostly stays on topic of the case, but they've clearly become friends. Carmine stands in his penthouse overlooking the city, thinking deeply, when the door behind him opens and a woman walks in. She says, "Papa." Carmine turns to face his daughter, Sophia, welcome home. The two share a long overdue hug. We fast forward to St. Patrick's Day. At the G.C.P.D, Gordon and Bullock discuss rising tensions between the Maroney and Falcone families, and that now that the board of Wayne Enterprises has approved the partnership with Falcone Imports, Carmine's money troubles are over, all leading to a situation where a single spark could ignite a gang war. And with St. Patrick's Day, holiday may give them exactly the spark they need. Sophia Falcone goes to visit Carla Vitti at her home, to find her out back training with a .22. Carla explains that it's the gun that killed Alberto, and she's going to use it to kill Holiday and get revenge for her son's death. Sophia tells Carla that she believes Maroney is Holiday and that she plans to hit him tonight on St. Patrick's Day to give him a taste of his own medicine. Carla agrees to go along. Frankie Carbone sits playing cards with some men at a Maroney safe house. When he starts hearing shooting, he and the men with him arm themselves and run out into the entryway of the house, where 3 men lay dead or dying. Frankie starts to look around when one of the men he came in with is shot and tumbles down the stairs. A firefight breaks out as Holiday opens fire. Holiday wins, getting the last hit on Frankie in the stomach, causing him to drop his gun. He starts crawling up the stairs bleeding as Holiday stalks up to him and pulls the trigger, but the gun clicks empty. Holiday starts walking away when Frankie starts talking smack. Holiday looks down to the gun Frankie dropped, grabs it, and puts a round directly into Frankie's eye. Holiday leaves, placing the gun and a leprechaun statuette on the stairs. Maroney creeps out of his safe house to see the massacre. He looks out the window and sees as a car containing Sophia and Carla pulls away. Maroney looks after them, rage filling his eyes. And with the end of our 4th episode, it's time for our second casting break. The first person we're going to talk about in this casting break is Vicky Vale. She's a former war reporter, fearless but not a combatant. She runs towards danger, always chases the story. And the problem that we're going to have with her character is that DC Comics has a lot of reporters who are also love interests. And so this is something that I'm going to tackle in 2 ways. Number 1, she's not going to date Batman or Bruce. I'm considering having her become a love interest for Gordon down the road, not during the course of this TV show. One of the things that frequently happens with the character of James Gordon is that he ends up cheating on his wife, on Barbara Keene Gordon, with another police officer named Sarah Essen. And I've never really liked that about Jim Gordon. I understand that it does give his character a certain level of a sort of level of that gray. You know, it makes him it gives him a little bit of depth in that department. But I think there's better ways to do it. And so while I am setting up Vicky Vale in this show as a potential love interest down the road, don't expect them to be together by the end of this show. Anyway, the person who I've cast for this role is none other than Neve Campbell. I personally love Neve Campbell. She's another one of those actresses who I feel like does not get the respect that she deserves. She's probably best known for her work on either Party of Five or the Scream series of movies, in both of which she is fantastic. She has a lot more range than I think she's given credit for, and because Vicky Vale isn't an especially important character to the overarching universe of DC Comics, she doesn't need to be, a huge big name actress. So I think Neve Campbell is on the exact perfect level to play this role, and I would be thrilled to see her do so. Next, we want to talk about Alfred Pennyworth, very much an important character in this universe. He's Bruce's most trusted confidant and friend. He spent many years as the Wayne's butler, and he's pretty good at it. He's a former agent of the British SAS, a highly capable fighter in both hand-to-hand and blade, as well as being a fair marksman. He's extremely loyal to the Waynes, and he keeps Bruce from retreating fully into Batman. In terms of casting, he must be a graying man of English, Irish, or Scottish descent, and he must have a great emotional range, which is why I've chosen for this role Liam Cunningham. Liam Cunningham, again, is probably best known for his work on Game of Thrones, where he played, of course, Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight. He is, in my opinion, one of the best characters on that show, which is very much saying something, because I would say that Game of Thrones is sort of defined and characterized by particularly good character writing, and I think that he is among the best of those. I think very highly of this actor. We see him almost in a very Alfred-like role already in Game of Thrones, where he is sort of the Alfred to Stannis' Batman, which is probably the only time that somebody is ever going to compare Stannis Baratheon to Batman, but here we are. He plays that role of sort of tempering his more harsh expectations, sort of making him calm down and think more logically about situations, and that's in some ways the same role that Alfred plays. And I think that Liam Cunningham is just an absolutely amazingly talented actor, and I just want to see him have more work. So on top of him being perfect for the role, I also just want to personally see him in it. So I've chosen Liam Cunningham as our Alfred Pennyworth. And the last one that we're going to talk about in this break is Barbara Gordon. This is a very, very important character in the overarching DC universe. One of the things that I want to really focus on the Batman side of this connected universe is the Bat family. In a lot of live action versions of Batman, we either don't get to the point in which the Bat family is being introduced, or they just never even attempt it. I think I could be wrong, I think the only live action Barbara Gordon there's one in the Titans show, although I haven't gotten to her yet, but the one that comes to mind is the one from the older movies, who wasn't even Barbara Gordon. She was like Alfred's niece or something. Anyway, my point is she hasn't really been done justice in live action, and so that's something that we really want to correct here. She's intelligent and quick-witted. She's confident and capable. She has a very strong sense of justice and ethics. She's athletic, something like gymnastics or swimming, something that would give her a leaner look. She's interested in forensics and criminal justice, and also a highly capable tech expert, although at this point in the story she's probably not. She's going to acquire those skills down the road, but I just wanted to mention it here. She also very much looks up to her father and has long red hair in terms of casting. So I was looking for a younger actress for this role, and there were a ton that I considered, but I ended up going with Sophia Lillis. I cannot think of a more perfect actress for this role, especially at the age that I'm looking at. I'm looking at somebody who is about to go off to college, and which is usually about 18 years old. Sophia Lillis is 20, which makes her only slightly older than that. So she fits right perfectly into that age bracket. She is an incredibly talented actress. We see her in It. We see her in just all kinds of things. I truly, truly believe that Sophia Lillis is going to be one of the biggest names in Hollywood in the next couple of years. She's just phenomenal. And I really did consider a lot of people for this role. I thought about Natalie Dyer. I thought about Maya Hawke. I thought about tons of people for this role, and I just could not think of a single person who would do a better job of it than Sophia Lillis. She has an amazing range, and I think she's the perfect person for this role. And the best part of it is, since she's still very young and sort of growing into her career, she's going to be introduced here, but then go off to college, and we won't see her again until it's time to bring her back in as Batgirl, which means Sophia Lillis can be here, go off and do all kinds of things for 4 or 5 years, and then come back and be our grown adult Batgirl. And if in that time she, becomes a murderer or something terrible, we can recast it. I would prefer not to have to, because again, I do think that she's the perfect person for this role. But it gives us a lot of versatility here. So I am very excited to see Sophia Lillis in this role. I wish that she would have been cast in it already. Episode 5, April Fool's Day. At the G.C.P.D, Gordon and our hero cops go over the evidence of the Holiday killings. They deduce there must be a reason Holiday uses the same type of gun for every killing, either because the killer can get them wholesale from a gun maker, or because the .22 is a lightweight, easy-to-handle gun, perfect for a woman. This leads them to suspect Carla, Sophia, and Pia, Sal's daughter. They add this to a list of previous suspects, which includes Carmine, Salvatore Maroni, and the now-deceased Alberto. Gordon thinks back to the conversation he had with Vicky, where she implied the killer could be a vigilante, and realizes that Harvey Dent doesn't have an alibi for any of the killings, so he adds Harvey Dent to the list of suspects. Dent left early on New Year's Eve, and they left Wayne Manor on Valentine's Day with more than enough time to confront the Maroni henchmen at the restaurant. The killer had to have been on the yacht at New Year's Eve, and Gordon remembers Vicky's account that there was a speedboat, implying that the killer was not there at the start of the party. They conclude that Harvey Dent is the most likely killer, but to keep that information between them until they have proof. Bullock meets with Commissioner Loeb in the rain outside a nightclub, and they share a brief, clandestine conversation. Loeb tells Bullock to just tell him what you told me, and he's not one of us, he's a killer. They are ushered into the nightclub, and to a booth where Carmine Falcone sits, making it clear that Loeb and Bullock are working with the crime lord for one reason or another. Harvey Dent returns home from work to find his door ajar, and enters carefully, gun drawn. He is soon greeted by 3 Falcone goons, who immediately open fire, although the close quarters nature of the fight results in them going hand to hand. After a hard fight, Dent is victorious, having killed at least one of the intruders. He finds Gilda hiding in the basement. She was down there working on some crafts when she heard them break in and blocked up the door. Gordon gets the call that Dent has been attacked, tells the team to take Montoya and takes Montoya and Cash to the scene. Bullock hangs back and goes to talk to Loeb. He tries to get Loeb to help him take down Falcone, but Loeb breaks the news to him that while Bullock is being forced to work with Falcone by blackmail, Loeb is doing it exclusively for the money, and that it isn't Falcone who holds the blackmail over Bullock, it's Loeb. Bullock quits the force and storms out, but before he can get out of the building, Loeb orders Flass to arrest him. Flass immediately and with excessive force arrests Bullock and throws him into a cell. Meanwhile, at the Falcone household, Carmine is stood before Carla Viti and Sophia Falcone, lecturing them. He explains that they have endangered the family by trying to make moves without his consent, by which he means going to the Maroni safe house. He goes on to say how they're on thin ice with the Maroni family, and that Salvatore saw the 2 of them leaving and believed that they had killed his men. He forgives them because we've lost enough family this year, but tells them if they try another stunt like this, he may not be able to protect them. Gordon and Dent go to see Bullock in his cell, where Bullock explains everything and apologizes tearfully. He tells them that when he was new to the force, he was forced to march a criminal, a child predator, or just some disgusting, irreparable, terrible crime, out to appear and put a bullet in his skull, and that if Bullock had not killed him, he would have been killed himself. This is something that I'm lifting from the Gotham TV show. It's not a good TV show, but it had some good points, and this was one of them. He goes on to explain that he thought he and Loeb were in the same boat, working together to take down Falcone, but Loeb is holding blackmail on him and an unknown number of other police officers. He tells them it was him who leaked that Dent was a suspect, something that takes Dent by surprise, and he apologizes. This breaks Dent's trust in Gordon. He yells at Gordon that he should know that he could never be Holiday, and at Bullock for endangering Gilda. But Gordon defends his position, saying that he still can't be sure. Dent storms out. Gordon shares a moment with Bullock where he says he doesn't blame him for what he did. We follow Gordon out of the holding cell. He marches straight into Loeb's office and calmly lays down the law, saying that he knows everything, that he'll take Loeb down, and he calls Loeb the 3rd kingpin of Gotham. Gordon goes to Finnegan's bar to drink away his day, and he's joined by Vicky Vale. She heard about Bullock and came to check in on her friend. Off the record, Gordon opens up to her about the situation in the G.C.P.D. and how afraid he is. Either I'm going to clean out the G.C.P.D. or I'm going to be killed by them. Gordon returns home late to an angry Barbara Keene, who tells him their daughter got her acceptance letter to Burnside and that they wanted to celebrate as a family, but Gordon came home late, smelling like a brewery. Barbara Keene really starts laying into him, and he snaps back that he does everything he can to be there for his family, but he needs to make sure the city is safe for them too. She ultimately understands why he does what he does, but she can't do this anymore. She says as soon as Barbara leaves for college, she's leaving too, and she's taking James Jr. with her, someplace better where they can live a more normal life. The next day, Bullock is being moved to a more permanent holding facility, while he awaits trial. But Holiday strikes, injuring the two cops escorting him and shooting all around Bullock, but intentionally not hitting him. In the comic, it's the Riddler, but he doesn't really fit into the story I'm telling, so I've replaced him with Bullock. Holiday leaves the gun and a jack in the box. Episode 6, Mother's Day. Gordon goes to see Calendar Man again, this time alone, to talk to him about the April Fool's fake-out. Julian greets him warmly, like last time, but talks in vagary, switching pronouns back and forth. He says, "He's making quite the name for herself, aren't they?" Gordon asks some pointless questions about the killer, which, paired with the fact Dent isn't there, lets Calendar Man know that Gordon suspects Dent. Julian offers to kill Dent if Gordon lets him out, promising to get a confession out of him before he does. Gordon walks away as Calendar Man taunts him. Meanwhile, on one of the Gotham bridges, Sophia Falcone interrogates a man for information on the gunsmith. He tells her the gunsmith Holiday uses operates out of a place called Shen's Tea House in Chinatown. She thanks him for the information, then shoots him in the leg, causing him to fall from the bridge. Sophia races to the tea shop. On the way, she calls Carmine to fill him in. He advises caution, but she reminds him that it's Mother's Day, and he relents. As Sophia pulls up to the shop, she sees flashes in the window and rushes in, gun at the ready, only to find the gunsmith murdered. A silenced gun left behind alongside a bouquet of flowers. Sophia swears, and we get the title card for Mother's Day. After the title fades, we are in the same location, but now with Gordon, Montoya, and Cash investigating the scene. They come to the conclusion that Holiday is cleaning house. Montoya finds a stash of .22 caliber pistols and finds that 4 of them are missing, meaning that Holiday is in their endgame and that there's 4 kills left. At the Dent residence, Harvey ruins a good night by bringing up having kids. They fight a good while. Hilda yells that she can't have kids. Harvey argues that she can get treatment or they can adopt, which only makes her angrier, as she argues that if she can't have kids the traditional way, that she doesn't want them at all, and that Harvey pressuring her is only making her want them less. Harvey relents and apologizes, and the two share a hug. We jump to Father's Day. Sophia Falcone enters her father's office as a meeting with the heads of the family ends, and once they are all out of the room, she presents him with a gift. He opens it to find a tie with a tasteful white rose pattern on it. Carmine appreciates the gesture and comments on how thick it is, to which Sophia says she had it custom made out of Kevlar, to which they both share a smile. Happy Father's Day, Papa. Yes, I've introduced Chekhov's bulletproof tie. I sure hope it comes up later. Gordon is home on Father's Day morning, but finds that Barbara Keene and James Jr. are gone. They took him to her parents' house. Or, Barbara took JJ to her parents' house. When he comes downstairs, however, Barbara, his daughter, greets him with breakfast and a coffee in a world's best dad mug that she made him as a child. They share a nice breakfast where we learn that Barbara knows about her parents' upcoming separation, but that she falls more on the side of her father, that she understands the realities of his career and says he's a hero for taking them on. Somewhere upstate, Salvatore Moroni is at a lake house in the woods, with his children Pia and Umberto enjoying the day out of Gotham and far away from the fear of Holiday. When suddenly a bullet crashes through the window and hits Umberto in the chest. Pia screams and drags Umberto out of the line of fire, but it's too late, as after a few moments, Umberto dies. Maroni, enraged, grabs a Tommy gun and bursts out of the cabin, shooting wildly. He gives chase into the muddy forest as a heavy rain starts. He continues chasing Holiday, firing shots every time he thinks he sees or hears them, but after a while, he gives up the hunt when he finds a .22 and a tie pinned to a tree. Maroni returns to the cabin to see his children, and he gets a new resolve on his face. Back at the G.C.P.D, Gordon goes over the Holiday case files, when his office door swings open loudly as Sal Maroni, escorted by Montoya, enters the room. Gordon motions for Montoya to leave them. Maroni tells Gordon that he's done, Holiday's ruined him, and he's going to take what's left of his family and get as far away from Gotham as he can. So he tells Gordon that if he drops all charges against him and his family, and helps them start a new life, he will testify against Falcone, who he believes to be Holiday. At the den house, we see Harvey stepping out of the shower. He gets dressed and goes over to a photo of him and his father. He opens a small black box in front of the photo, pulls out a two-headed coin, gives it a flip, and walks away. As he does, we see a pair of muddy boots. At the end of our 6th episode, you might be expecting a final casting break. However, at this point, all of the characters who I believe who necessitate a proper casting have already been cast. Some characters, like Sophia and Alberto and Salvatore Maroni, while iconic characters, are not necessarily important or large enough characters to justify, having a specific celebrity in mind. There are characters who I believe would be more properly suited to just a casting call and finding somebody who's an up-and-comer and who can fill the slot. And Gilda Dent, who will become more important later in the story, I believe is better off being somebody who is not recognizable. Gilda Dent is characterized as a character who sort of fades into the background and is very soft-spoken, and I think that aspect of her character would be somewhat diminished by being a recognizable actress. So I think it is actually better for her character to be an unknown actress. Anyway, let's move on to Episode 7, Independence Day. Gilda and Barbara sit at the kitchen table of the Gordon house, talking over coffee. They talk about Gotham and how it will never be fixed no matter how many people like their husbands give their lives trying. Barbara Keene goes on to tell Gilda that she's glad to be leaving next month. She has an apartment in Midway City, in Michigan, and she encourages Gilda to leave too. Gilda says she completely understands why Barbara is leaving. She says, "You have a son to worry about, I don't." But she says she plans to stay and help Harvey clean up the city. Gordon overhears this part. Barbara Keene is incredulous, reminding Gilda that she's been attacked in her own home twice in the last year, but Gilda maintains that Harvey said this wouldn't be forever. Gordon goes to visit Bullock at Blackgate and discovers he has a bandage under his eye from a fight with a man Bullock put in there. Gordon promises to get him out of there, but Bullock tells him he needs to be worried about himself and make sure Loeb doesn't get anything he can use against him, or they'll be sharing a cell soon enough. At the G.C.P.D, Gordon talks to Dent, and he tells him they have a high-level witness that wants to testify against Falcone, but that he can't tell Harvey the witness's name for their own security. They need to keep this between as few people as possible if they want to make it work. Dent is upset but understands and leaves. Montoya asks Gordon if it was smart to tell Harvey, seeing as how it's the 4th of July and he's their top suspect. Gordon says, probably not, but if he is Holiday, we need evidence, which is why you and Cash are going to shadow him for the rest of the day. Montoya looks confused but quickly flags down Cash and gets to following Dent. Meanwhile, at the Falcone penthouse, Carmine has gathered Sophia, Carla, and a number of his underbosses to him under the disguise of a meeting. Sophia, in private, points out that based on the level of security at this meeting, it's clear that Carmine is worried something will happen tonight. To which Carmine responds that if Holiday can't get to them, he'll have no choice but to go after Maroni instead, before heading in to begin his meeting. We see Montoya and Cash following Dent. They share a conversation about whether or not Harvey Dent is Holiday. Montoya believes he is, but Cash doesn't. They resolve that one way or the other, they'll find out tonight. Gordon sees Loeb leaving the GCPD and goes after him to catch him. He catches up to him outside on the front stairs of the GCPD and asks him where he is going, and points out that Holiday is going to strike tonight, before throwing a jab at Loeb, saying that he should care since his boss is the one being targeted. The fireworks have begun. Loeb says he's late to a meeting with his boss now, and that if Gordon was a better cop, he would have caught Holiday by now, to which Gordon starts getting truly angry, and says he could have if Loeb wasn't in the business of arresting the good cops. Loeb starts yelling at Gordon full volume that he's naive. This is the way Gotham has always worked. Bullock wasn't a good cop. He killed a man to save his own skin, and someday Gordon will understand it's better to play the game than to get played. But before he can finish his sentence, Loeb clutches his chest and as blood begins to bloom on his shirt. Gordon looks past Loeb to see Holiday standing cloaked at the foot of the stairs. They stoop to place the gun next to a figurine of the Statue of Liberty. Gordon draws his gun and gives chase, fireworks exploding overhead, but he loses Holiday and calls Montoya and yells, "Where's Dent?" Montoya answers confused that he's in his office. They've had eyes on him all night. Harvey Dent is innocent. This represents a major dead end in the Holiday case. We see the next few days go by quickly. Gordon is named commissioner. Loeb's funeral is a full show with the entire police force in show. Montoya comments that it makes her sick to see a man so crooked get a hero's funeral, but Gordon tells her that it's better that the people of Gotham not know so that they don't lose all faith in the police. Bullock is released from Blackgate and reinstated at the GCPD as captain. Bullock asks Gordon how he can trust him, which Gordon says, "You went to Blackgate rather than continue to be a pawn. How could I not trust you?" And with Loeb gone, there's no one else to pull Bullock's strings. We get a final shot of our cop team, Commissioner Gordon, Captain Bullock, and Detective Montoya and Cash, arranged around the Holiday murder board, starting over from page 1, but with a newfound dedication. Episode 8, Labor Day. Gordon stands on the lawn in front of a dorm at Burnside College, holding a box. He looks incredibly out of place. It's the sort of situation where Gordon is a somewhat haunted, police commissioner who's seen some terrible things, and all these other fathers are, these granola munching, Birkenstock wearing type dads. And also a note on Burnside College. I originally was going to use a real college, like a Columbia or something. But Burnside, there's a specific Batgirl run, a newer one, called The Batgirl of Burnside, where she becomes Batgirl while at college. And while that's not the story that I'm going to tell here, it's just a fun little Easter egg for people who are in the know. You got to give the new rock stars of the world something to point a red arrow at and point out. So that's one of those. Barbara calls him into the dorm and he follows her in, meets the roommate, Frankie Charles, also from that same comic, and speaks with her father, who tells Jim, "This is what it's all for, huh? We work so we can give them a better life than we had." Gordon agrees. Gordon steps outside to take a smoke break. After a moment, Barbara joins him. "I thought you quit." Jim responds, "I quit smoking at home." She smirks at him and he resigns, putting the cigarette out. They share a moment wherein Gordon apologizes for not being there for her this last year. She assures him that while he wasn't there every time she wanted him to be, she knows she can always count on him to be there when she needs him. They embrace and Gordon goes on his way. On his drive home, Gordon tunes into a radio show hosted by Jack Ryder. Jack brings on Vicky Vale as a guest. Jack lambasts the GCPD for not having caught Holiday yet. Vicky defends them. Vicky argues that with Gordon as the new commissioner, they may be better as a force, so Jack starts bringing into question some of Gordon's choices, like pulling Bullock from Blackgate to make him captain, and failing to catch Holiday after Loeb's assassination. Gordon arrives home to find that while he was out, Barbara Keene moved out, leaving the house largely empty. He wanders through the house before collapsing onto his bed, feeling truly alone. Meanwhile, at the Falcone penthouse, Carmine is celebrating his birthday. he surveys the crowd to see Carla, Sophia, and surprisingly, Maroni sat at a table with some of his men. Carla talks to Carmine. She is deeply upset that Maroni is there, and she still wishes her brother a happy birthday, but she leaves. Carmine gives a speech to the crowd. It's a noticeably smaller crowd than the one at the VD wedding, because a lot of them have been killed. He begins by thanking everyone for coming, singling out Maroni when he says, "Keep your enemies close and a loaded gun closer," which earns a chuckle from the crowd. He goes on to say how the Falcone and Maroni families have weathered many hardships this year, but that they remain a powerful joint front, an obvious lie. The mood is raised, and Falcone really shows off his capability as a leader and an orator. But as he's finishing up his speech, the elevator behind him opens up, revealing the corpse of Carla Vitti, alongside a piece of birthday cake, a .22 with a baby bottle nipple over the barrel, and a second .22 still clutching her hands as though she was going to fight her killer. We cut to the police investigating the scene. Cash says Holiday's breaking out of his MO, that today wasn't a holiday, but Montoya corrects him that the Roman's birthday is one of the biggest holidays in Gotham. Gordon comments that it was a failure that they didn't consider it. Clearly he's still feeling down from the radio show, and that there's only 2 guns left, meaning there are 2 chances to catch Holiday. Gordon and Falcone have a conversation where Gordon tells him they will still put everything they have into catching Holiday, but after that, he's coming after Falcone, telling him that his days of controlling the G.C.P.D are over. We skip ahead to September. At the Dent house, Harvey and Gilda are sharing breakfast. They talk about how today is a big day because it's the day Harvey is finally going to put away Falcone. Harvey goes to leave, and we linger on Gilda for a while. She turns and starts heading toward the basement. At the G.C.P.D, Maroni is speaking to Gordon and Montoya. When Dent comes in, Maroni comments on how both of them were at one time thought to be Holiday. The police get suited up in their tack gear to move Maroni to the courthouse so he can give his testimony. They're moving him through the sewers in the hopes of evading both Holiday and any Falcone supporters who may have caught wind. They creep through the sewers for some time before they run into a shut gate that should have been open. They have to reroute. Gordon tells everyone to be on high alert. They come to a more open area in the sewer, and standing at the far side of the room is Holiday, covered head to toe with a .22 in their hand. Gordon and Dent move to the front and point their guns at Holiday, but Maroni speaks first. He starts talking shit, saying he knows Holiday was working for Falcone, even going so far as to call Holiday Carmine. Maroni taunts Holiday, saying, So what, you're gonna kill me now? If you do, it'll mean war. My men will tear your family apart. Holiday answers in a woman's voice and says, I'm counting on it. As she does, she hits a winch that drops a grate between the cops, separating Montoya and Cash from the rest of the team. Gordon, Dent, Maroni, and 2 other cops start shouting at Holiday, who raises her arms in surrender. But the yelling has drawn attention. Solomon Grundy comes lumbering into the room. One of the goon cops opens fire on Grundy, who brushes the bullets off, but comes charging in, killing the cop almost instantly. Chaos erupts. Holiday takes off down a tunnel. Maroni gives chase, producing a gun of his own. Dent chases after Maroni, but Gordon stays to try and help the other cop, who Grundy also quickly kills. Gordon lowers his gun and tries to talk Grundy down. Grundy is about to attack Gordon when Montoya and Cash open a fire on him through the grate. Grundy chases after them as they run to escape the sewers. Gordon goes after Dent to find him standing over the body of Maroni. No Holiday in sight. Gordon and Dent are shaken. Episode 9, The Long Halloween, and the finale to this television series. On the morning of Halloween, Gordon gets ready at home, and he thinks of his family. He remembers last Halloween. Better times. While thinking of his family, he remembers a conversation he overheard between Gilda and his wife, in which Gilda said she would help her husband clean up the city. Harvey Dent answers a pounding at his door to find Gordon, who asks, How long have you known? Harvey starts asking him what he means, but Gordon cuts him off, yelling, How long have you known Gilda was Holiday? Harvey relents. Since that day in the sewer, when she spoke, I knew immediately.
Gordon asks where she is, but Harvey says she hasn't come home since that night, but he invites him in and shows him to the basement saying, "You should see this." In the basement, Harvey pulls the cloth off a workbench, revealing a box of .22 caliber bullets, a box of baby bottle nipples, a vise covered in metal shavings, and a file. Gordon recognizes immediately that this is where Gilda must have prepared for her kills. He asks Harvey if he knows where she is, because it's Halloween. She has one gun left. She will strike tonight. Harvey doesn't know for sure, but agrees with Gordon's suspicion that the only target left must be the Roman himself, Carmine Falcone. Gordon goes to the G.C.P.D, gathers a force of police officers, and says, "Tonight's the night they finally catch Holiday. They know who the target is. They know when she's going to strike. They will never have a better shot than this." A team of 10 officers, including our 4 hero cops, suits up and head out to the Falcone penthouse. The cops arrive in force to the penthouse and at first are met with obvious aggression by the team of Falcone's men and Sophia. But before things get ugly, Carmine shows up to defuse the situation and allow them in, with Carmine joking, "I thought my days of working with the G.C.P.D were over." An uneasy truce set, Carmine, Sophia, Gordon, and Bullock start making a plan, trying to figure out where Holiday will strike from and how best to lure her in, but stop her before she gets to Carmine. Their planning is interrupted when one of Falcone's men runs into the room and says a group of Maroni men are gathering outside. The group rushes out of the lobby to see for themselves as one of Maroni's underboss comes into the lobby. He calls out Falcone as Holiday and for destroying the Maroni family. So now the Maroni family is going to take a page out of the book and kill Holiday. Falcone tries to defend himself, but before he can, 2 garbage trucks slam through the front of the building as a dozen Maroni henchmen follow through the breach, all dressed as Holiday, and a firefight ensues. The cop/Falcone alliance are pushed out of the lobby as the firefight goes room to room and gets close quarters. We cut to the outside of the building where Harvey Dent pulls up, sees the situation unfolding, and goes to rush in. But before he can, he sees Gilda heading for a side entrance. He calls out to her and she takes off running. We cut back and forth between this chase where Dent is being very careful not to shoot any of the Holidays, not knowing whether or not they're Gilda, and the firefight with our other heroes. Eventually it winds up that Dent loses Gilda, and the heroes are pushed back into Carmine's office. Gilda is able to get a shot off on Carmine and hit before she is tackled by her husband. Sophia rushes to her father's aid, where they share a moment wherein she finds that the bullet was stopped by Chekhov's Kevlar tie that she gave him for Father's Day. Montoya and Cash handcuff Gilda and Gordon asks her why she did all this. Gilda explains the whole thing, that her and Alberto fell in love while at Oxford, that she got pregnant, but when she found out that Alberto was the eldest son of a crime family, she tried to run. Carmine sent Milos after her, which resulted in a car accident that caused her to miscarry and left her incapable of having children. When she heard that the Falcone and Maroni families were coming together and would have complete control of the city, she decided that the only way to get justice was to do it herself. So she became Holiday. Montoya and Cash take her away, leaving Carmine and Gordon alone in the room. Carmine walks out onto a balcony overlooking the city, and Gordon follows him. Carmine gives the long Halloween speech, which goes something like this. "Do you know what my people call this last year? The long Halloween. My nephew, my son, my sister, half my men. Why? Because of me. I wish I had been a better father to my son, but now I'll never have the chance, and for that, I am so sorry." Gordon tells him that being the victim of a crime does not justify committing a dozen others. You deserve to be tried and punished for the things you've done, but you didn't kill your family. Gordon leaves with each of them having some level of adversarial respect for each other. Back at home, Gordon is sitting alone. When his doorbell rings, he grabs a bowl of candy and goes to answer the door, assuming that it's trick-or-treaters. But instead, it's his daughter, Barbara, back from college. After the credits, we get a scene of Alfred walking into a lab. where he is greeted by Lucius Fox. Lucius says they've been making great progress thanks to the partnership with Falcone Imports. Hiding the necessary purchases has been easier than ever. Alfred asks if it'll be ready by the time he gets back. Lucius looks at a partially constructed Batman cowl on a desk and says, "Of course it will." And so ends The Long Halloween. So there we go. There's the whole thing. I warned you it was going to be a long one. It's not really surprising considering that this is a 9-episode television show, meaning that it's the contents of about 9 hours of television. So I knew it was going to take a long time. So thank you if you've made it this far into the video. I very, very much appreciate the time and commitment that you've put into this. I put a lot of effort into writing this script, so I really do hope you like it. But if you have any questions or any concerns about it, or just any thoughts about the outline that I've proposed here, please let me know in the comments below. I genuinely would be very, very interested to hear any thoughts about this, or how I can take it into the next steps going forward into, phase 1 and phase 2 of this rewritten DCEU. I genuinely would be very interested to hear your thoughts on all of those things. And if you like this content or just want to support this channel, please, of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel, maybe share it with a friend. Say, hey, this moron just wrote a 2-hour video talking about a proposed pitch for a TV show that'll never happen. I would really appreciate it. It was a lot of work, but I enjoyed every second of it, and I hope you did too. So until next time, I'll see you around.